welcome again to episode 4 of the Equity East Midlands podcast. This is the 4th of 16 episodes. We're going to talk about Spotlight. So join us reflecting on the importance of equity through our lens of lived experience. Today's podcast, we've got Kim Gillespie.
Hi.
Mel Parker and Ken Ogborn.
Hello.
Talk about Spotlight. Equity are currently in a court battle with Spotlight. The first court case has taken place in the High Court on the 16th and 17th of July, so we don't know the outcome of that at the moment, but we do know that back in the day, Spotlight was a directory that was printed in every theatre in the land, had their bookshelf full of contact books, and everybody who was an actor who was available for work was in that book, and people would look through it. They would bring people for auditions. In the age of digital, that's all gone online. And I think a lot of people have been very uncertain about how the money for that has gone up and up and up. I mean, the main thing, in 2021, Spotlight was taken over by a private company, Talent Systems LLC. So it was sold to an American company, having previously been a family-run firm. The cost of membership, considered a necessity for finding work for UK performers, rocketed, and it increased 30% between 2021 and 2025, whereas in the previous 12 years, it had increased by just 13%. So today we want to just talk about how important is Spotlight and why we're talking about one platform within an industry that has lots of platforms. I think Kim, you're a director, Ken, you're an actor, Mel, voice artist, myself, I'm a stage manager. So I've never been in Spotlight, never needed Spotlight. So over to you, Kim. What's your experience with Spotlight?
Well, as you said earlier, I used to run or be part of an agency, a co-op agency, where we had the Spotlight on the big shelves. And as soon as we went in, we'd kind of check all the way through for, as if we didn't know what we looked like. We went through looking for our photo on that page. And then as part of a co-op at that point, I was involved with the Cooperative Personal Members Association, Personal Management Association, with the Employment Agencies Act that came in around about 2005, and we had a lot to do with them. I went down to the Department of Employment to put the co-op's case, because it didn't seem fair that Spotlight actually at that time were getting an exemption. I mean, we weren't allowed to pay upfront fees because it was a job, or seemed to be a job-seeking agency, and we weren't allowed to charge upfront fees. We had to justify that training fee, which was 30 quid, I think, at the time. We had to justify it and itemize it in terms of what it did pay for. So that it was a real problem, especially for co-op agencies at that point. So why? I'd kind of be interested to know what's happened in the meantime in terms of why Spotlight had the exemption then, because it seems to be totally justified that they shouldn't have that now, being owned by this American company. But apparently they think they've got a case against equity or equity, maybe don't feel confident about winning, but I'm sure they will. But I don't know what the kind of perspective is on Spotlight, because I haven't been in it like you, Karen, for a long time.
So, Ken, you are a Spotlight member.
Yes.
So tell us about your Spotlight experience, and is it as important? Does it feel as important for you and other actors that are in your network at the moment?
Yes, and I have undergone a personal journey from being a long-standing amateur actor to being a semi-professional actor, where I'm paid for some work at the weekends, but then I have a day job during the days, during the week. And then I've transitioned into becoming a full-time professional actor. And on that journey from amateur to professional, one of the most important things you can do is get onto Spotlight. Is get an equity membership. It used to be get an equity card. And getting into Spotlight is this waypoint, is this gateway into you are now a professional. This is a badge of professionalism. You're in Spotlight. Here's your Spotlight ID. Well done. You've made it. Now, there used to be qualifying criteria. I think you had to have 4 paid productions within a year. You had to be able to evidence those with contracts and with invoices, so they had to be evidenced. And once you'd got that, away you went. That was it. You'd got your Spotlight ID. It's the mark of being a professional then. So it's also the gateway to all of the opportunities in our industry. I've never met a producer who hasn't scouted Spotlight for the talent they want to work with.
I think extensively, don't they? Because
yes.
you've got a play to cast and you've got 4 roles. You
yes.
want to see who's appropriate. And we are still in an industry where, do you look right for the role as
yes.
well? There is a certain look that people will be looking for, because it says, you know, an age of a character with a certain, you know, they are lines that people will look for. So to be able to go to Spotlight and already know that there's been a certain level of validation for them, that if you do decide to employ them because they've got the right look, will they have any experience, so that if you bring them into rehearsal room, it's not their first time in a rehearsal room? How important do you think that is? But going back to the fact that this is a court case about a directory, and equity is standing up for us. I mean, the whole thing about a tax on hope, I think, is the way the union have kind of been looking at it. It's hard enough to get anywhere in this industry, but then to get into this closed club, is that necessary?
Yeah, so the reason producers use Spotlight, casting agents use Spotlight, is because it's a way of cutting their risk on taking on talent. And you've been there. You've just said it's the way of ensuring the talent you take on has the right experience of being in a rehearsal room and able to perform with other actors. So it's a way of cutting down the risk of casting a show. Spotlight's defence hinges on the fact that they're useless. Spotlight's defence, because they're being attacked, they're being told, you're an employment agency, and yet you're the only employment agency charging fees, and you shouldn't. Spotlight's argument against that is, we're not an employment agency. In other words, we don't help people find work. So their entire defence is that they're useless as a means of finding work. So that's a pretty odd defence from a company, is to say the reason we're able to charge fees is because actually we're useless.
Because Mel, you're a voice artist. Voice artists aren't in Spotlight. So what happens in your industry? How do you find work? Are there similar directories that are paid?
Yeah, it's really, really interesting, because a lot of voice artists are actors, actually, so they may well be on Spotlight for their acting work. But as a full-time voice artist who doesn't do acting, it's not something that I've ever felt the need to sign up to. And we certainly don't have that same, as you've described, Ken, this, you know, to say that you've made it as a voiceover artist, you must be on Spotlight. Not at all. However, we watch with intrigue, because in our world we do have a number of what people call pay-to-play sites, where you go on to said sites, and there are a number of them, and you pay a subscription in exactly the same way as Spotlight is being described, to have access to auditions. So in a very similar way, someone who is a casting director for a voice project will go on to if this is their chosen route to cast their voices, go on to said pay-to-play site, tap in their project, and it will match in the algorithms or send out invitations to a number of voice artists. Each pay-to-play site is slightly different. So it's quite similar, really. People are paying on those pay-to-play sites for access to work, but no guarantee. You're not even a guarantee on some of them that you'll even be invited for an audition. There are various different ways that they work. So I'm watching with intrigue the outcome of this, because then we can question, how does that apply to our world? Because I see these pay-to-play sites as no more than a directory as well of voice artists that you're paying for the pleasure of being on.
Sorry, Mel. Yeah, Mandy Backstage Star Now, which is also the same, which is one company, which is why I mentioned in the same breath. Mandy Backstage and Star Now are the same company. They also charge a subscription fee to actors to access the jobs that are there. And, you know, I don't think Indeed for job access that is not in the performing arts industry, I don't think Indeed does. I think I touched on a couple of other sort of conceptual ideas of what Spotlight is. If I were to approach the town council to get a stall in the marketplace and position my wares on a stall in the marketplace, I would have to pay the council a rental fee for setting up my stall and setting out who I am. So is Spotlight a marketplace for actors? That's a concept which the court will have to decide upon. Is it? There is a marketplace analogy as well with a site like Auto Trader. Auto Trader has products on it, which are cars. Those cars are put up there by private individuals who want to sell a car. They're also put up there by dealerships who are wanting to sell 100 cars. And they put those little items on the Auto Trader website and they pay to advertise. And is Spotlight therefore an online marketplace like Auto Trader, where I put myself up and I brag about my script learning abilities, and I brag about my aerial hoop abilities, and I brag about my acting abilities. So, is Spotlight like an Auto Trader site? Where does it fit in these analogies of whether it's a marketplace or an online marketplace, or exactly what is Spotlight? I think is going to be interesting. I'd like to hear what the listeners' thoughts are on what Spotlight actually is.
And it all hinges on the cost, doesn't it? Isn't that the point? Yeah. That if you times the subscription fee by the number of members, you get X million pounds. Does it really cost X million pounds?
Well, I mean, that's the point, is it? What are members paying for? Actually, yes. What it comes down to is what are they actually paying for? And like I mentioned earlier, Spotlight, there seems to be no onus on Spotlight to specify exactly where that money going. Is it going to the back pocket of the CEO?
Because we are, you'll never guess, coming up to our 10 minutes.
10 minutes up.
These conversations that we're having on the podcast, these are conversations that we want to have sat at the bar at Curve second Wednesday of every month at the Regional Equity East Midlands branch meeting. We want to be able to have a committee that meets and talks about what's specific to the industry and how it relates to the region that we're living in and wanting to work in. We don't always work in the same region that we live in, but when we are at home, it's where we're starting to look for work. And if we can find work here, and the directories that are available and how much it costs when you're not working is a huge thing at the beginning of a career. So I think the Spotlight outcome is going to be an interesting one across all of the employments, getting a job. Equity don't have their own directory anymore, which they did because Spotlight were the big champion of it. So people tended not to use the one of Equities that was created because they paid a membership. So I think that industry focus, and we could talk about this one, I think, like we've talked in previous episodes in this little short run of 4 that we've done. So I hope if you have listened to this as your 4th episode, thank you very much. If you haven't listened to the others, pop back and look at the archive. If you're listening on audio, do subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, do like and subscribe. And these conversations that continue. But for this episode, thank you, Kim. Thank you, Mel. And thank you.